The Bridge Street History Center isn't just a house of artifacts. It's a home for stories, each one illuminating a piece of our town's legacy. So join us today as we uncover yet another piece of Granbury's history.
All right. Well, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Tom Hamilton with the Bridge Street History Center. And in fact, we are in the Bridge Street History Center right now in the office area. This is Monday, July the 28th, and it is getting hot. It's as hot as August. And today, I'm interviewing Roger Enlow, a Granbury native, who was a longtime editor of the Hood County News and is presently a freelance writer for a magazine. And also Cody Martin, another Granbury native and the proud owner of the longtime Granbury business Martin's Office Supply. So welcome, guys.
Thanks,
you,
Tom.
Thank you.
I think this is going to be fun today. It's a little bit different interview than what we usually do, because most of our interviews are about the Granbury Renaissance, but we were talking about it and we feel like that most of the people listening to this interview weren't around before the Granbury Renaissance began, and their concept of Granbury is more or less what it is today. A burgeoning community with all of the lake development and the tourism, and we would just like to kind of give us some insight into what Granbury was like pre-lake, and having two natives who grew up here will really help us in this cause. To also set the stage, I happen to be from Dublin, and so until 1968, Granbury, Dublin, Hamilton, Cisco, De Leon, we were all in the Comanche, we're all in the same football district. And in fact, Dublin was quite a bit larger town than Granbury at that point. Mm-hmm. So all of those communities have pretty much stayed just the same. If you drive through them today, it'd be like driving through them in 1965. And we all know what has happened to Granbury. So with that in mind, let's get started with some stories. One thing we talked about the other day is the perimeters of this town back when y'all were growing up, and discuss that a little bit. I think that's interesting.
Well, I think what we talked about, Cody and I were raised on a street in Granbury called Doyle Springs Road, and at that time, that was the farthest south of Granbury as far as the city. And how would you describe it, Cody, Doyle Springs Road?
Well, if you're heading south on Morgan Street, which is Highway 144, this was before the bypass was built. So the town basically ended at that time I think Doyle Springs, that development, Roger's dad, Chief Enlow and Harley Powell were some of the developers, I believe. That was the newest development in Granbury. And going south on 144, where Brookshire's is now, was the city dump, the town dump. And essentially, once you were past that, you were in the country.
Yeah.
That was
just farmhouses every now and then.
Yeah, till you got to Glen, got to Glen.
And y'all's place on Doyle Springs Road, that was before you get to where the bypass is.
Yes,
now.
just right before it.
Okay.
Yes, right before it.
Okay, so that's the southern deal. Now, give us some more parameters.
What do you remember? Now, I would, again, we were relying on my memory. I would say to the north, the cemetery. I mean, if you passed the cemetery, again, you were out in the country.
The old cemetery, the old Granbury Cemetery.
The original.
Holly Hill Cemetery and First Baptist Church today, it was not existent. It wasn't there.
Right.
But yeah, the old cemetery, that was about as far north.
Yeah.
I think.
And to the east, Roger, you were telling the other day about Durant Chevy, you know, town ended right about where I would guess where the conference center is now.
Yeah, there was what was we called the Old Iron Bridge. It's not there anymore, but that was over the river, and that was well, you passed it going east, and there wasn't much left after that. I mean, there wasn't hardly anything.
No,
maybe a little grocery store, service station, maybe way out there at the Acton turnoff, and maybe a restaurant. But no, I've got a story to tell about what the late Gene Durant told me about Durant Chevrolet when it moved from Pearl Street. It was on East Pearl Street, where it is today, out further east on 377. That Jew Durant, who owned it, said, you know, when we move way out in the country like that, we're not ever going to sell another car. And of course, now they're one of the top dealers in the United States.
Now, where was the original Durant Chevrolet on Pearl Street? How far out was it?
Well, now this goes back maybe before my time, but now it was on the square for a period of time. Right? Am I correct
That's
about
right.
that? And then where the boat ramp is now on Pearl, next to the conference center, that's kind of where I remember their showroom and their car lot. And then when the lake came in, they lost their ability to park cars.
Yeah.
So that was, am I correct? Is that what forced them to move?
Yeah.
And heading west, the drive-in, that was your
Brazos
western
Drive-In.
That would have been your western boundary. You know, there weren't any businesses.
So was the drive-in built back when
Oh,
y'all
yeah.
were kids, or even before then?
I was born in '52, and the drive-in opened in '52. I've seen that, so I'm the same age as the drive-in. We're both pretty old.
We won't make it clear.
The drive-in was during the summertime. That was about the only entertainment in town, and it was huge. I mean, everybody went to the Brazos Drive-In, and I mean, you could either stay in your car or stay in the back of your pickup, and I know some people. I guess we did too. I don't quite remember, but I know some people would bring lawn chairs and just sit up in the back of their pickup and watch the movie, or they had a little concession stand there with chairs in front. You could sit there and watch the movie. But
and I know, Roger, I had at least two speakers. You know, they had there was a post with two speakers on it, one for each side. And I know at least two times I'd hang that thing on my window and I'd forget to take it when I drove off. So I had at least two of them at one time.
I just wonder if there's any of us that haven't driven off a drive-in speaker at some point.
No.
I know
this may be jumping the gun, Tom, but then we had two theaters. Then at the Brazos Drive-In, that was summertime entertainment, and the Palace Theater. That was during the wintertime. It'd be open, and that would be on the square. That was the walk-in theater. And
where was the Palace?
The Palace was in the middle of the south side of the square, where 1890? That's 1890. That was the balcony of the Palace Theater, where 1890 is upstairs.
Right.
Yeah, it had a little balcony. I got a story about several stories, but the main one on the Palace, I don't know if it was the 4th of July or a New Year's Eve or something, but it was a holiday where they sold fireworks. Well, we were a bunch of us kids, the younger kids were down front, about the second or third, and usually it was a horror movie that was being played, a Frankenstein or a Dracula movie or a Wolfman or something. And the older boys were up in the balcony. They started lighting bottle rockets. Now this is in a theater, closed theater with people inside, several customers, and they started throwing bottle rockets down, passing. They started whizzing by our heads, and I think they caught some of them caught on a box on the stage, and a little fire broke out. And so, man, we were trying to get out, and so those chairs were like folding chairs, and I got up when my leg got stuck, and my buddies were already past me, running out, and I hollered at them and said, "Guys," I said, "I can't get out," and these bottle rockets are going. I said, "Come get me out, I'm stuck." And finally they did, and it seemed like it forever, but they pulled me out and got to safety. But needless, I can't believe this, but the old man, Mr. Poor, who ran the theater, he shut the movie off, turned on the lights, and said, "That's it, we're going home." And of course, he was immediately booed off the stage for doing that.
Well, now, for the record, do you know who was throwing the bottle rockets? You care to name any names?
Might have been Cody Martin. Might have been one of them. I don't know.
No, wasn't me.
No, I think
it's because I didn't think of it.
Yeah, there were some boys that were probably 2 or 3 years older than us. That's who we blamed anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
Some of the old high school boys.
Yeah,
Big,
yeah.
older.
From what I understand, give it about 3 or 4 more years, and it would have been Roger.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back. Y'all live close together,
Right across the street.
and apparently there were quite a few kids in that same area.
Absolutely.
And you guys
Well, yeah,
like the game.
I call it now the Doyle Springs Mafia.
There you go.
Back then, and I'll name names, you had the Beal brothers, Richard and Gary, Pat Collins, me, Roger, Randy Frederick, John Gregory, Steve Powell. That's just on Doyle Springs, right? Did I miss
Yes.
anybody?
Yes.
And then the next street over.
Well, your brother too.
Well, my brother, who's 12 years younger, but so he was kind of a different group.
You say John Gregory?
Yeah.
John and Mike and Michelle?
Mike and Michelle,
Well,
yes, they're
yeah.
older. Jack Powell, Dick Powell. So there were 20 criminals on that street.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you had Crestview, the next street over. My cousins, Mindy, Cooper Mangold. You had Nick Walker. You had
Mike Clancy.
Mike Clancy.
The Holmes boys, Holmes
Yep.
brothers.
And then on
Did the Hodges boys come down from Elizabeth?
they might have visited every now and then.
I seem like Barry did a little bit. I don't know about Jerry or James.
Yeah,
I don't know.
remember them. They didn't venture that far from their home turf.
I think they had their own gang up there.
They probably did,
And then
yeah.
the next street, actually, you had the Myers and some other people like
Yeah.
that. But yeah, it was a hotbed of activity. And back then, Roger and I, we've talked about this, but I remember probably from the time I would say 9 years old, 10, up until maybe teenage years in sports. In the summer, you'd wake up in the morning, eat breakfast, and you'd go to the river. This was obviously before Lake Granbury. And you'd play Bill Fort's, rope swings, do the Tom Sawyer thing till lunch, and then you'd run back up to the house and eat lunch, and then you'd go back down to the river until dark, and you'd explore.
So the river was the playground.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'd play Army down there, and
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there was a group of big boulders similar to the Paluxy and Glenrose. If you go by the park where they have, it was very similar to that. It wasn't as many as on the Paluxy, but there were 3 or 4, and we called it big rocks. Remember, and you'd mess around on big rocks, and we'd fish a little. We'd fish some, and we usually had more active activities. We'd get bored if we didn't catch a fish in the first 10 minutes or something.
Right.
And we'd move on to throwing rocks or doing something else,
there was a little cave back in there too that you may have. I don't know. I never did really explore much of that. I mean, you couldn't really get back in it too much.
Yeah, Pat Collins and I crawled. He crawled up further than I did, and I crawled up and maybe 20 feet, 20 or 30 feet.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And he swore that it opened up into a bigger room, but there were too many spiders and snakes, so I just trusted
Probably
what he
wise.
said.
Yeah.
I had no idea there was such a large cave. It's the first time I've heard that.
Yeah, it's the spring where there's 2 streams at the end of Doyle Springs. There's one stream that runs down into the lake, and then if you're driving across the bypass bridge now and you look to your right if you're heading west, you'll see kind of an overhang in one of the little caves. They've bricked it up partially, but those were the streams that gave Doyle Springs its name. And they also provided water for Indians, ancient peoples who were there thousands of years ago. And so we would find arrowheads either in our yard or before the end of the street, cul-de-sac was paved, and we would find arrowheads just random. And so at some point, myself and my friends decided that was kind of neat. So we would, then go on arrowhead hunts, and we would ride our bikes out to, where Stumpy's is now, is where Rough Creek hits the lake now, but there were campsites up in I forget that development, right after you cross the bridge on 144.
Scenic View?
Scenic View, yes, up in those hills. We would find arrowheads there. We got pretty good at spotting campsites up and down the river. So it became a hobby for years, and then personally I kind of fell out of it for many years, but I enjoy doing it now. Pretty much all the places that I hunted as a kid are underwater.
Right.
So
that's interesting stuff. Another interesting thing to me that I think a lot of present-day Granburyans didn't realize or don't realize about the successful business that was here, the toy factory that was quite the producer.
That was my grandparents, the man on my mother's side. My mother's maiden name, she was Olive Jane Mangold, and she married my dad, Cody Martin. But the Mangolds, Bob Mangold and Mattie Mangold, started. My grandmother, actually, the story I've always heard told is that during World War II, when toys were scarce and folks couldn't buy toys for their kids, she started making stick horses just for friends and relatives, friends, and other people would ask for them. The typical story of a home business turning into a fairly large business. And sure enough, over a 10-year period, from I guess the late 40s through the 50s, it was growing. And at one time, I believe, I read that I remember parts of it. I was pretty young when all this was going on, but I do have memories of it, of course. But I think at one time they employed over 100 people here in Granbury. It was on Travis Street. It's where there's a bed and breakfast there now, Travis Street Cottages, I believe. Uh-huh. There's only one, the house, my grandparents' house is still there, where the current owners live. And there's one building, they've got a little pool table in there now, a little recreation hall. That was the part where I believe they painted the sticks. They had all kinds. There's a YouTube video. If you'll go to YouTube and just type in Mangold Toy Factory, it was actually a film done by Mobile Oil. Gosh, I was like 3 or 4 years old, so I didn't remember that film had even been made because I was too young. But years ago, Burl McClellan had asked me, ever so often the newspaper will do an article on the stick horse factory, but Burl had asked me for information, and I said, well, Burl, I'll give you what I got, but I don't have much. And this was in the early days of Google and the internet, so I just Googled Mangold Toy Factory, and it popped up. I believe it said Southwest Collection at Texas Tech. So I assumed it was a magazine article. I didn't know. So it took me a week or two to get hold of somebody that even in that department, and I finally get hold of someone, and I said, hey, that was my grandparents. I'd like to get a copy of that article. And he said, well, it's not an article, it's a film. And I said, oh my goodness. I said, so how do I get a copy of it? And this was back in the VHS days. And so he said, well, send me $50 and I'll put it on a VHS for you. So he did that, and I've subsequently uploaded it.
Awesome.
But that cute little boy right at with the cowboy hat, that would be yours truly, right at the first. But no, I didn't. It was. You can imagine my surprise on seeing it. And my grandparents are in it, and there's local people, that are workers that are filmed too.
Yeah.
That are, most of them, obviously, all of them are long gone now.
Right.
But
they were just
at one point that was the largest stick horse manufacturing company in the United States.
Yeah, well, and at the end of that video, if you look closely, that YouTube video, the very last shot, they zoom in on it's a carton of stick horses, and it's the shipping label, and all it says on the shipping label is, it says Sears and Roebuck Company, Lima, Peru. no other address. So there was obviously just one Sears in Lima, Peru.
Right.
But it's amazing to me, and I don't know what freight company or I don't know who you gave that box to, but
Worldwide.
somehow it got to Lima, Peru.
Oh, gosh. And y'all had some interesting personalities back in those days. Y'all were telling me a story about an old lady named Phoebe the fortune teller.
Certainly, Roger. Go ahead.
Yeah, Phoebe was an older black lady that lived in Granbury, and I think it was for $5 you could go and she'd read your palm, tell your fortune.
Wait, $5? What did you say? Did you say $5?
I think it was $5. Why? What'd you pay? A quarter?
I thought it was 5 cents.
Oh, well, she got me.
Yeah, back then I don't think it was.
Yeah, well,
Whatever. But
it might
yeah,
have
Phoebe
been.
may have taken advantage of you.
she may have.
But did you get a good fortune out of it?
But it didn't turn out. If I remember right, she said I was either going to be a lawyer or a doctor. And
For $5, she told you were going to be the president.
I know it.
she missed that. She missed it. But there are other stories about her that she supposedly, there's one story, and Cody, you probably know more about it than I do, but she led law officers to a drowning victim, I believe. Isn't that right?
I heard that, Roger.
Yeah, I think there was I think it was a child that drowned on the river, and she told them where
She had some
he or
psychic
he could be
sense.
found, and I think they found him near where she sat.
Well, and
Yeah.
and I remember, of course, going and getting, and her house, by the way, was on Travis Street where I believe it's government housing there now. It's just a block, it borders the library, or Shanley Park right there to the north. But Mango Toy Company was just another block down the street, and when we were probably, 7, 8 years old, myself and my cousins, Mindy and Cooper, Mango, would ride back from the toy factory to our house in the back of my uncle's pickup, and we would just stand up, jump up and down, play, back then, who cared, So one night when I was at home, our phone rang, and my mother answered, and she had a concerned look on her face, and she'd go, "Oh, really? Oh, So anyway, she hung up, and my dad said, "So who was that?" And she said, "Well, it was Phoebe," and she had a vision that the kids fell out of the pickup, and my dad said, "You don't have to be a fortune teller to know that's going to happen."
Oh, John.
I cleaned it up a little. He added something else in there.
Right. And so, again, just to magnify what a small town it was back then. Roger, you were talking about, or maybe it was Scott, one of you all were talking about your adventures in the courthouse.
That would have been me, and I'll name, since I don't think we can be criminally charged anymore. The statute of limitations is run out, but it was Pat Collins and I, and this would have been 64, 5. It was the advent of skateboards, and where you saw them on TV or a magazine, a picture of a kid, but of course there was no place to buy a skateboard back then. So Pat and I decided to fabricate them, and we had the old steel wheel roller skates that you strapped on your shoes.
Yep.
So somehow we got hold of a couple of 1x6s, and we disassembled our skates, our steel wheel skates, and mounted the wheels onto these boards, which it worked pretty good on a totally smooth surface, but if you hit the tiniest pebble on those steel wheels, of course you did a nosedive onto the ground.
Right.
So somehow, I don't know whether it was my idea or Pat's, but we figured out that the main hallway in the courthouse on the lower floor, it was linoleum, it was nice and smooth, and we said, hey, it'd be cool to do that. So we knew they wouldn't let us do it during the week. So on weekends, a couple of weekends, I remember there were back then. There's still, if you look down at the bottom of the courthouse, there's vent holes, whatever. And most of them were covered with steel grates, but 1 or 2 of them weren't. So Pat and I would crawl down into the basement of the courthouse with our homemade skateboard, and we would wind our way and come up there's a trap door under the stairs on the north side, I guess. And we would just skate up and down the main hall of the courthouse there, till we got tired. And then we would come crawling back out. And I can remember numerous times people would see us either going in or out, and they'd honk and wave, like, hey, look at those kids breaking in the courthouse, And nobody, it was like nobody, they knew, I guess they knew we weren't up to any bad stuff. We were just playing.
Wow.
So, but yeah, it was a totally different. Can you imagine now?
Right.
You see a couple of kids.
You never got caught. You never got accosted. It just,
Oh no!
whatever.
Yeah,
Cody, you might want to tell the story about you. I think it was Pat, maybe somebody else, but when y'all went on top of the courthouse.
right. That was
tower
That
there.
was Pat Collins and I. We one time, who knows what we were doing, but we were up at the courthouse, and Hugh Ropp, who was a longtime resident of Granbury, he wound the clock in the courthouse for years. Maintained it, wound it, whatever. And so he saw us and he said, hey boys, you want to see the clock? And we go, yeah, sure. So we, go up to the top floor, and I can't even remember. We get into the room where the clock mechanism was, watched him wind the clock, and then we see a little ladder, another little ladder over there. And we said, hey, Mr. Ropp, where does that go? And he goes, oh, that goes on the very top. And we said, well, can we go out there? He goes, yeah, go ahead, So we crawl out on the very top of the courthouse, and we're...
The widow's walk.
Yes, the widow's walk, and we're just sitting there with our legs hanging off and yelling at people, going, hey, you! And, people would look around, they'd finally look up at us and go, you boys get down from there. So, yeah, it was a different world, that's for sure.
It absolutely was. That is phenomenal.
So I don't know how many people are alive today that can say they've been up there, but probably
not many.
Probably
Not
not
many.
too many.
My mother was kind of an adventurous type lady, and she would love to take us boys to different places. And a lot of times we would go to the old jail here. Of course, at that time during the '60s, it was a working jail. That was the only jail in town, but we would go there where there wouldn't be any inmates in there. And she knew the sheriff and his wife. Orrin Baker, they nicknamed him Morning Sun. There's a story behind that, because he would always greet everybody, no matter if they were male or female or girl or boy or whatever. He'd tip his big old Stetson hat and say Morning Sun, and that's where he got the nickname Morning Sun. And he called his wife sister, and they both lived in the jail. And I think she cooked. She was a cook there, cooked for the inmates. But at night, after school, or it might have been during the summer anyway, she would take us boys up there, and we got to go inside the jail, tour the jail. I mean, we'd go upstairs. I mean, it was pretty bad. I mean, it was a dungeon-like place. And but for sixth grade boys, that was real interesting to us, But
Looking at the trap door.
yeah, and
She was trying to motivate you to not do anything where you wind up there.
yeah.
How long did Orrin Baker live there in that jail?
I don't have a clue.
I don't know. I think he may have served. I may be wrong about this, but it seemed like he served more than one term. Morris might know more about that than me, but yeah, that's where they lived. I'm pretty sure that's where they lived.
Well, I knew they did at some point. I didn't realize it was still well into the 60s.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
God.
she cooked, and yeah.
So now y'all said that you used the river as kind of a playground, but there was the city. Y'all had a city pool too, right?
And that would have been, when was that built, Roger? That would have been mid, I wasn't in high school, I know that. I would have been in elementary school, so it would have been 65-ish.
No, I think it was before that. I was like barely in the first grade,
Oh, okay.
maybe.
So, yeah.
So I think around
Early
1960, maybe 61,
Oh, yeah.
somewhere like that.
And that was
And,
obviously a center of activity in the summertime. You would go up there and stay all day.
My dad was on the city council during that time, and it was a big deal. We didn't have anywhere to go to swim. There wasn't a city swimming pool, and they built that, and they sold lifetime passes for $100 a piece. And I think Cody was one of the first ones. I got one. My sister got one for $100, and that's helped pay for the pay for the building
Yeah,
of the pool.
that's how they finance it.
That's a great cut to the lifetime pass to the swim.
Yeah.
But I remember how I can just picture it today. How clean, how pure, I mean, it was like pristine.
Yeah.
You know, just so white and blue, and you know, because we didn't have any of that. Oakdale Park.
Yeah, in England.
You know, we'd go down there at Oakdale, but it wasn't like that. It was more of a
Well, it was built in the 30s. Or
yeah.
something, so was
It had
pretty-
like a, I don't know what kind of surface on the bottom, but I mean, you'd scrape your
Yeah,
your
yeah,
feet on them and
right.
toes and all. And
Now,
but
I've never heard of Odell Park.
Oakdale Park
Oakdale.
in
Oh,
It's
Glen
right-
Rose.
It's
In
right
Glen Rose.
across from the
Biloxi,
Biloxi
yeah.
Park where the boulders are and all
Gotcha.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember at some point after I moved back to Granbury, my kids wanted to go swim. They had remodeled the pool
Yeah.
in the over that,
Yeah.
whatever, 30-year period. But I took my kids there and I tried it. I said, now I've got a lifetime pass to the swimming pool. And they said, you're crazy, old man. We ain't,
Yeah.
we don't know what you're
Same
talking
thing
about.
here.
It'll be $10, you know.
Yeah.
I said, oh, okay.
So it wasn't a lifetime pass.
No, they didn't.
It
Nobody.
sounded good. At the
Yeah. I said, now, I've got a lifetime pass. No, they don't.
My mother entered me in swimming lessons there and at the pool. I was about probably 6 or so, and our teacher was the high school football coach, head football coach, Fred Weir. Well, we swam a little bit, you know, but then I remember the day that he came out and he got on the diving board, he was in his coaching shorts and coaching shirt and whistle and cap. I guess he just came from two-a-days probably, or was about to go or something. And he said, okay, we're gonna jump in and we're gonna swim across to the other side. And we were in the deep end, you know, because I think the deep end was it 10 feet
believe
maybe?
it was, yeah,
10
it
feet,
was.
which, you know, and of course I was a scaredy cat, and I said, I'm not going to do it. And he said, what do you mean you're not going to do it? He said, you're going to do it. And I said, no, sir. I said, I'm going to drown. He said, you're not going to drown. He said, I'm right here. I'm on the diving board. I'll jump in and I'll save you if you start getting in trouble. I said, I'm not going to do it. He said, yes, you are. I said, no, I'm not. I said, the only way I'll do it is if you jump in the pool. And he didn't like that because he was, you know, he didn't have a swim. He had his coaching stuff on. Well, he finally jumped in. He said, okay, now I'll do it. And said, I did. I went in and just swam across.
You're a tough negotiator.
Yeah, I was.
Speaking of Fred Weir, the football thing, another thing about the small towns back then is a lot of us knew other kids from other towns so much, like Billy Williams that ended up owning the K-Bobs
Right.
here and one of the grocery stores. I knew him when he grew up in Comanche. I knew
Yeah.
some of the kids from Hamilton. I knew Jerry Hodges here, and some kids from De Leon. Everybody, you know, pretty much got along. Every once in a while there'd be a fight, but
Well, Richard Stevens, that your teammate,
Sure.
you know, opened up Stephenville Savings and Loan, right? He ran that for a while.
yeah, he was the manager of it for as long as it was here, I guess. And then I got to know Cody in not such a great way.
Well, I'll tell that. Tom and I, you know, Jerry Hodges, who I went to high school with, was a fraternity brother of Tom's at UTA. And so I had met Tom through hanging out with Jerry and so forth. But I had moved away from Granbury. I graduated in '71, went to college. So I was back and forth, you know, summers, working, but then got a job in Fort Worth and was over there for 20-something years. So basically I didn't live here for that 24 or 5-year period. Well, at some point, Tom, when did you come here? When did you establish
75.
Okay, so not long. That was when I graduated from Charles. So anyway, when I moved back to Granbury, I knew Tom was a dentist here, and I said, okay, I need some dental work. So I go, and sure enough, I needed a filling apparently. But anyway, so as I was in the chair, and Tom had his drill and his needle and all this, and he was getting ready, and I said, you know, we were talking about old times and how Granbury used to play Dublin. And Tom said, yeah. He said, you tore my knee up years ago and I had to have surgery. And I said, Tom, I don't think it was me. He goes, oh yeah, it was you. He said, I watched it 10 times on the film. I said, well, Tom, I don't remember that. I said, are you sure I need a filling? I said, yeah. I didn't feel real good about the guy whose knee I tore up standing there holding a drill in his hand. But, and Roger and Tom, this would apply to both of you. Back then, I remember sports or your football team, it was kind of like you were defending your town. You weren't just, it was a pride thing, and you weren't just saying, our school's better than your school, or our football team's better than your football team. The mentality was, our town's better than your town, and we're going to prove it. We're going to come out here and whip you.
The football team absolutely represented the town.
And that's how. Did you feel that way?
Yes.
Yeah, sure you did.
I think all of the towns.
Well, I remember one of the ways I used to get motivated or fired up on home games. I would get mad because the other team showed up. It was like, how dare they come here and think they're going to beat us? And we usually won, but sometimes we didn't. Yeah. But it was, it was a matter of pride back then.
Yeah. Back in the office that day, I knew that you needed to fill in. I just wasn't for sure if you needed anesthetic.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, I was pretty scared there for a while.
Okay, well, there's some. Y'all were talking about some other shenanigans that went on at in the school, at the schoolyard, and with teachers.
Oh, Roger, there's so many,
Well, matter of fact, I think it was yesterday I was telling somebody at church, I don't know how this got started, but I said, I think I got licks from every male teacher in Granbury High School.
Yeah, I did, absolutely.
That had to have been a record.
Oh, no.
Did you?
Yes.
That was just common.
Yeah,
back
Jim
then,
Best, who was the shop teacher, and it was always stupid. Back then, if you needed something in shop class, he'd say, go to the lumberyard. Well, we'd go to the lumberyard, and then we'd go get a Coke and a moon pie and sit under a tree and show up. Right before class ends, well, you'd get licks. I remember, I guess it was my sophomore year, I had a string going of getting licks every week. And so at some point, Friday rolled around, and Mr. Best said, get up here, Martin. He said, I'm going to give you licks. And I said, well, Mr. Best, I didn't do anything. He said, oh, you did. I just didn't catch it. And I'll take this opportunity to tell the pie story real quick. About Ron Norman. I'll go ahead and name another co-conspirator. But so we were in typing class. The typing class was in the old red brick building that still stands there where forward training is now.
Yes.
And across the hall was the homemaking class. So Ms. Gant, bless her heart, was our typing teacher. So one day we're in typing class and she had business to tend to, or an errand or something. So Ms. Gant says, hey, I'm going to run do something. She said, I'll be right back. Gave us an assignment. So she leaves. So Ron and I are sitting there and we're typing. And one of us, I don't remember who, said, man, I smell something cooking. I said, yeah, I do too. So I said, well, let's go across the hall and check it out. So we go over there, nobody in the homemaking class, but there's like pies laid up on the counter, all these pies laid out. I said, oh good, the girls, practice pie cooking today. I said, let's get us a piece. So we found a plate and a knife and a fork, and Ron and I each cut us a slice of pie, and we sit down, I took a bite, and it was terrible. This was horrible. And he same thing, he goes, man, this is the worst pie I've ever tasted. So we walk over to the window and throw them out. Throw a piece out the window. So we go to the next one, same thing. Bad, tasted bad. So I think on the fourth or fifth one, it was a good pie. So we ate it, we washed everything, put it up, think, no problem. So we go to our next class, and then Willie Crossan was the principal, and he comes on the speaker and said, Cody Martin and Ron Norman report to the office, So we thought, we're literally, truly puzzled, like, wonder what's going on, So we go in there, and there's like 4 or 5 girls, and Ms. Gant and the homemaking teacher, and all of them are in tears. They're crying. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I thought maybe those pies were poisoned and they're afraid we're going to die or something. What's going on? And Mr. Crossan, Willie said, did you boys eat some pie over there in the homemaking class? And we said, well, yes, sir, we did. And so he said, well, ladies, y'all can be excused now. He said, I'll take it from here. So they left, and he shook his head, and he said, boys, why'd y'all cut so many pies? And we said, well, Mr. Crossan, we just kept going until we found one that was good, you know. And he said, well, they're so mad, I got to do something to you. And we said, well, we understand, Mr. Crossan. So he said, okay. He said, you can either go back over there and each one of you can eat one of those bad pies, or you can take licks. Oh, and the reason it was such a big deal was these were the pies they cooked to enter in the county fair.
Whoa.
We did not know that. We honestly, I swear, 60 years later, I didn't know that. So we felt bad. But we told him, you know, when he said either eat the whole pie or take licks, we said get the paddle. He said there's not much choice there. But I've had people over, not recently, but in years past. Years ago, I introduced myself to someone that I had no clue who it was, and she said, oh, it wasn't a local person. She goes, oh, well, you were one of the boys that ate the pies. And I said, yes, ma'am, that was me. So that story's been around a while.
You know, when you said Ron Norman, it made me think, clear back when I first came to Granbury and was playing different sports teams and baseball and volleyball and stuff, tennis with you guys. One day I was eating something, and I was with Ron, and I got kind of choked. And he kind of beats me on the back and says, I didn't want you to have a Cody Martin choke down. And I said, what are you talking about? And he goes, man, Cody Martin, I don't remember the exact story, but he said one day he got choked on something. And
I remember,
we thought he was really going to die.
Yeah, I've done.
And it's stuck in my mind every time I get choked on something. I go, oh no, it's a Cody Martin choke.
No, I can't remember what, but yeah, that happened. That happened for sure.
Cody was talking about Bobby Gant, she was my typing teacher, and I guess we were juniors or seniors, whatever it was. And I thought, you know, why am I in this class? Because whatever I'm going to do after I get out of school, I'm never going to do any kind of work that involves typing. Well, that's all I did when I got in the newspaper business. And anyway, so I didn't really apply myself in typing class. So we were in a new building, and from the typing class, and the building had no windows. Had no windows in the building, and so we were about to take our test, and I thought, you know, I'll just look at the keys. You're supposed to be, you're taught not to look at the keys. Well, I just looked at the keys. Well, she put red tape, little blocks of red tape over those keys, and I couldn't, I didn't see. Well, we got to where we could pull that tape off pretty quick. Well, here comes the big test. I thought, I'm going to ace this. So I started taking the red tape off, and she said, okay, go. And then she turned off the lights. It was pitch black. I mean, pitch black, because there wasn't any windows in that room. And so needless to say, I didn't do very good on that test.
Well, I'm like you, Roger. I thought, man, I'll never type, and I spend hours a day on a keyboard for years. So Ms. Gant, thank you for teaching me that. So,
well, boys, have we run out of stories?
Well, one thing.
No, we could sit here for the next 3 days and tell stories.
Exactly. One thing I've told all y'all this story, but I'll get my perspective is on Granbury. I grew up here, of course, and the lake filled up when I was a junior in high school, and that
was in 69.
Yeah. So basically, I didn't get to see what we would call the Renaissance or the transformation. Granbury, I didn't get to see it. I mean, I was, again, college, back and forth, working, then I moved to Fort Worth. So I was gone for that 20-some-odd year period, from 71 to 90, whenever I moved back, 95 or whatever. And I remember one time a sales rep came to Granbury to call him. He was from out of state somewhere. And we were going to lunch, and I was driving through the square, and I was telling the guy asked me, I said, hey, I grew up here, this is hometown where I grew up. And he said, well, what's it like being in business in the town where you grew up? And I said, this isn't the town where I grew up. I said, another town dropped on top of it. So, and Tom, I'll turn the tables on you and interview you. You know, we've talked about this. Granbury and Dublin, like you mentioned, you know, we're in the same football district with Comanche, Dublin, De Leon, Cisco, all these little towns. And you're on this track, and then once the lake filled up, once the square starts being restored, Granbury goes one direction, and these other little towns kind of stayed the same. And not that they haven't changed, and not that there's anything bad. But I think, you know, that's part of what we're trying to do here at the History Center is tell the story of how the town went from being one thing to being something totally different.
Absolutely.
As opposed to you know, what your hometown, Dublin, which I'm sure it's changed. Obviously it's changed.
Yeah, it's changed.
But not to the degree Granbury has.
Oh, no. I mean, it hadn't necessarily changed in a good way.
Right,
So,
right.
Well, we had two things going there, you know, the lake and then the restoration of the square. And it kind of piggybacked. It happened very similar. And, you know, I'd go to towns, especially with my daughter in sports, my son in sports, and we'd go to towns, I won't mention them, but other towns similar to Granbury, and you know, they were the county seat, had the town square, but did not have the restoration, the charm that Granbury, the older buildings that were restored, they weren't like that, and it was you know, somebody asked me, it was a Star Telegram writer years ago to ask me about that, and I said, well, you know, used to I would say that I'm from Fort Worth. If I was in Houston or somewhere, I'd say I'm Fort Worth, but I was able to say then after the restoration that I'm from Granbury, you know, because everybody knew where Granbury was.
Yep.
But it was kind of depressing going to other towns and to see their squares, and it wasn't nowhere near like Granbury. You know, they would change. I mean, they'd tear down their buildings, and you know, it wasn't the period style. I mean, it'd be like from the 1970s or 80s or whatever it was, and you know, we don't have that in Granbury.
You know, I think what goes with that too, because of the transformation, because Granbury, you know, and a lot of that's because of our geographic location. We're close to the Metroplex, but you know, the opportunity that the growth presented, you wouldn't have been here had Granbury had it stayed.
Yes.
You wouldn't have been able
exactly.
to stay. I wouldn't have been able
That's
to
right.
come back and make a living. So, you know, I think that's something I appreciate is that the town did change and presented a lot of opportunities for people, you know, like me that could stay here, and people like you.
In my mind, Granbury, the town, was very fortunate that the lake was put in.
Oh, absolutely.
And had the opportunity, you know, provided the opportunity. But we were also fortunate to have a nucleus of the citizenry that was forward-thinking enough to invest in that community and try to, you know, realize that it could be something special and preserve it and make it something
And since
special.
Tom gave me such a good setup, you know, that's part of what we're doing here at the History Center is we're calling it the Renaissance Project, and we're trying to give credit to those people, like, and I don't even want to start naming them because I'll leave them some out.
Right.
But those group of visionary people who in the late '60s and early '70s looked around and realized, you know, that you have this pristine town square that could be restored, and so, you know, we're trying to tell those stories, not just the stories. Of course, we tell the stories of the early founding people, the Landers, the Nutts, Amon Bond, all of whom I'm a descendant of. That's a whole nother story. But anyway, we're trying to tell the story of these group of people who brought the town back to life, so to speak.
Yes, and we're still trying to interview some of the older folks that can still identify with them.
Right.
So hey, this has been a great time for me. I hope you all have enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah.
And I hope that we've provided something for future generations to look back on.
I hope so too.
All right, thanks a lot.
All right,
guys.
Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Cody.
Yes, sir. Yeah.